everybody, and welcome to this morning's podcast, this week's Sermon Rewind from the pulpit of Acadiana Baptist Church. We're so glad to see everybody today and hope that you had a wonderful day so far. With me, as always, is Peyton, and he's got some questions and things to ask me. But before we really get started, what are you drinking there, Peyton?
I am drinking a cold brew coffee with some sweet cream.
And once again, we are still not sponsored by Scooter's Coffee, but I still scooted on around and picked up our coffee. So with that being said, Peyton, I'll turn it over to you, buddy. Go ahead.
That was only borderline cringy, but we're going to go ahead and get through with this. So we are in the second week of our Easter sermon series. It was all about, which our sermon series is on the cross of Christ. If you haven't watched last week's, I encourage you to go watch that, as well as this week's. So the message from this week was all about the message of the cross. So if you want to kind of go really quickly and tell us the big idea, the main point of the sermon before we kind of dive deep into it. So,
yeah, the whole idea behind yesterday's message was that the cross dominates the landscape, but I wonder, does it dominate our life? And the message of the cross, it has to be our life's message. And it's kind of bounced around there what the message of the cross is and Paul's desire to preach it. And the result of the preaching of the message of the cross is the power that comes from it.
Right.
And you had some really nice things to say about it. I appreciate that. And I had a good response from everybody. And it's just a lot of fun to preach. And I've really enjoyed talking about the cross this Easter season. You know, this is a really big week. And preaching on the cross leading up to the resurrection is a big deal.
right. So your first point was all about the preaching of the cross. And you had used three different O words, that the cross is offensive, it's operative, as well as overall. So my first question that I have for you today is, how does the message of the cross challenge the church today, as well as the believer themselves?
Well, the fact that it's an offensive message is not anything new. It was offensive. See, when we look at the cross, we look at it in a 2024 perspective of things. For Paul's listeners, the message of the cross was incredibly and highly offensive. I mean, we don't sit around our coffee tables talking about the electric chair.
Right.
They didn't sit around talking at their tables about the cross either.
Wow.
And it was just an offensive message in general. And the fact is, it's still offensive to individuals today. We're living in a lot softer of a climate. People don't like to have their world rocked by such a violent message. And that's what the message of the cross is. It's an incredibly violent message. So preachers tend to steer away from things that might offend people, and in an effort to bring people in, they've kind of camouflaged Christianity in a sense and started preaching a softer message.
Right.
And the fact about that softer message is, while it might bring people in, and fancy slogans and nice buildings might bring people in, might bring a good crowd in, but it won't save anybody.
Wow.
It's through the cross that we're saved. And I think that's the biggest challenge today, is finding that understanding that the power of the cross is why it's so important to us. And I think preachers and churches in general have to understand the necessity of the cross in everything. Without the cross, there is no gospel. Without the gospel, there's no message of salvation, and we have to stand on the gospel. So, yeah.
Right. Kind of close to the conclusion of your sermon, you had said these three different points that I took notes on. The message of the cross is a message to both to savor and to share. Mm-hmm. You also said it is a message to be preached by everyone to everyone, and the powerful cross changes our eternity as well as our everyday. So the second question I have is, what are some obstacles that Christians encounter when it comes to the message of the cross?
Yeah. Well, I mean, we know personally how it's affected us, and I hope it means everything to us. And we have no problem sharing things that mean something to us. But when it comes to sharing our faith, it gets nerve-wracking, and we wonder if it's going to really affect, you don't talk about politics and religion around your friends. And so
Right.
That's one of the most difficult things people have. But, we can not talk about politics and not talk about religion all we want to. But the fact is, we have to share the gospel because we're commanded in the scriptures to share the gospel.
Right.
And sharing the gospel is, at its core, it's sharing the message of the cross. And that's why it's so important. We have to get beyond our fears, beyond our worries, and just do what God has called us to and leave the results to Him. I think sometimes people also think, Peyton, that it's their responsibility to save people. it's not our responsibility to save people.
Right.
It's our responsibility to share the gospel, sow seeds, and pray over those seeds, and let God give the increase. And once we realize that all the responsibility is on the hearer, and we have the responsibility to deliver, it's really the hearer's responsibility to make a choice.
Right.
So that's what I think.
The last question that I have for you is, you ended the sermon with talking about how the power of the cross is immediate as well as continuous for our growth and salvation. So the question I have is, how does that thought shape our lives today?
Yeah, of course, first of all, when we realize the immediate effects of salvation in the heart of a believer, just the depths of the forgiveness of sin, the immediate release of guilt, the immediate experience of joy and relief that we have, those are all things that we enjoy immediately. But that's when we first meet Jesus, is at the cross, and we shouldn't leave it there. It continues on. And what I really enjoyed preaching yesterday, when I was thinking about it in my study the other day, I couldn't help but get past all of the ways that if we just look at the cross, all the different ways that it can help us every single day.
Right.
And, for example, we talked about, if you want to know what surrender looks like, just look at the cross. Jesus surrendered his life. You want to know what forgiveness is like? Just look at the cross. These are real everyday issues that people struggle with. We struggle with forgiveness. I don't want to forget, Brother Jason, you don't know what that person did to me. Well, no, I don't. But Jesus did, and he died on the cross for that. And if his death was sufficient to forgive their sin, his death is also a good basis for me to being willing to forgive them also.
Right. Something that you said in the sermon that I remember was, Jesus took our everything and he nailed it to the cross.
Yeah, that's Colossians 2:14. He took the handwriting of ordinances that was against us, and that phrase, handwriting of ordinances, is like the list of ingredients or the things that you buy to make a meal. It's your bill.
Wow.
And you have to pay this bill before you can take those goods home. And the thing is, we all have a really long list of things that kept us from him.
Right.
But he took every one of them and nailed it to his cross. And man, that to me is one of the most powerful verses of Scripture that I can think of when it comes to the cross and the immediate power of the cross, but also how it continues progressively in helping to sanctify us, setting us apart to live for Jesus and for him.
Right. We just have to know that Jesus went all the way to the cross, not halfway.
Right.
We just want to thank you so much for tuning in. Do you have any last thoughts?
Yeah, man, it's a busy week for us here at ABC. The Easter season's a big deal. We got three brand new, three new things that we're doing this year. We have we're going to kind of do a Passover meal where I'm going to cook some lamb and have some unleavened bread and fruit of the vine here. We're going to talk about the Passover indeed. I'm calling it a 4D experience.
Right.
And then we also are going to do our first ever sunrise service.
Yep.
We're going to set up right out the front of the church here at 6:45 Easter morning. And then we have our Easter worship at 10, of course. And then at 6 o'clock, we're doing a different Easter egg hunt for the kids. We're doing a flashlight Easter egg hunt.
Wow.
So a lot of good things going on. And through it all, I just want to encourage everybody to think about Jesus. It's fine to visit with family, which we're going to get to do Friday. It's fun to do Easter eggs, get Easter baskets. And I love it when you reach an age where you no longer get an Easter basket, you get a laundry basket full of stuff. It's always a fun thing. Everybody's getting new outfits. It's always a good day. Easter's a good Sunday. And but through it all, we have to keep Jesus at the center of it all. So.
Yep. We want to thank you so much for tuning in to the ABC Sermon Rewind. We hope you guys enjoy, and we'll see you next week.